Why is it that the religious know absolutely nothing about atheism? I mean, they like to play make-believe, but when you compare what they claim to what atheists actually say, they share nothing at all in common. And it's not just PsychonautWispy, it's all apologists. Why are these people so dense? I don't know, but maybe we'll find out coming up next. Welcome back to part 2 of PsychonautWispy's 5 meandering complaints about atheism, even though none of them have anything at all to do with atheism, because the religious really don't have the slightest clue what the hell they're talking about. Surprisingly, and I really am surprised at this, I haven't had to fast forward through a lot, at least not as much as I thought I'd have to. Nothing has been concise, and there's still that stupid plant. I mean, honestly, what is with that plant? But framing aside, let's go see what else he has to say about his complete misconceptions of atheism and reality as a whole. This should be fun.
My point number 3 is that there's a religious negativity bias, right?
I don't know. Is there? I mean, I'm sure you're going to get into it, but I wanted to say something before that. In general, a negativity bias comes because, at least according to some people, you are more likely to respond strongly to negative things rather than positive things. I'm going to assume, and I could be completely wrong, that he's going to propose people see the negativity in religion more so than they see the positivity because of that bias. Now I'm going to let him get on with it. I just want to remind people of that classic Steven Weinberg quote that says, "Religion is an insult to human dignity. With or without it, you would have good people doing good things and evil people doing evil things. But for good people to do evil things, that takes religion."
If you talk to someone who is an atheist and ask them why they don't like religion, oftentimes they will bring up things like the Crusades. I've seen people bring up things like Islamic terrorism, like, for example, the Catholic Church's suppression of information, right? And yes, I mean, they've got a good point, right? There have been really terrible religious people, just as there have been really, really terrible atheist people. I mean, just look at the Soviet Union, right? I mean, persecution of all kinds of religion in the Soviet Union, right?
Let me stop you right there. See, this is where you're not understanding what's actually going on. Where you have the Crusades and Islamic terrorism and all that, those are things that can only happen because of religion. If you removed religion entirely from those situations could not have happened as they did. These are evils done in the name of religion. However, nothing in the Soviet Union was done in the name of atheism. None of it was caused by atheistic beliefs, mostly because there is no such thing. They were done because of communism, not atheism. Religious people were penalized because communism requires complete adherence to the state, and religion gets in the way of that. That's not atheism, and a lot of people simply misunderstand how any of this works. When you think about it, communism actually operates very similarly to religion. It's why Joseph Stalin reintroduced the Russian Orthodox Church. It was great at maintaining control.
So neither sect of beliefs is entirely blameless, right? It's humans.
No, mostly because atheism isn't a set of beliefs by definition. I know that shocks the religious, But we are not just like you are. We are not religious like you are. We do not have woo-based beliefs like you do. And that's why the religious don't make these videos for the non-religious. They just make them to preach to the choir who already believe exactly as they do. Because the rest of us, we just laugh at these absurd misconceptions.
Right? Humans are crazy, and there's good people and there's bad people. It doesn't really matter, if they believe one thing or not. The fact of the matter is that people are going to be good and people are going to be evil.
Yes and no. Where religion becomes a problem is where it starts granting people permission to be evil. When they start telling people that they can't help but be evil. When they start teaching that there's an imaginary devil figure out there that's tempting people and there's nothing at all you can do to avoid that temptation because you're inherently sinful. When they start telling people that they can be possessed by these demons and it's not their fault when they do bad things under that influence. When you start telling people that as a sinful human, all you have to do is ask forgiveness from an imaginary man in the sky, and everything is A-OK again. All of this stuff comes from religion, doesn't it? It doesn't come from a secular society. It doesn't come from atheism. It's you guys.
Okay. Now, point number 4 is the complexity theory. And they like to poke holes in that as well.
Only because it's so absurdly simple to do. Now, I'm assuming he's going to get into it again, so I guess I'd better get out my sharp stick because the religious ideas of complexity are just absurd on their face. I mean, honestly, why don't they ever ask themselves if it's so ridiculously easy to point out just how stupid these ideas are? Why in the world would they keep holding these ideas? This is because, as I've said before, they lack the capacity to step back and evaluate their beliefs rationally. They're not interested. So long as it makes them feel good, they're going to keep going along with it because they're really not that interested in whether or not it's actually true. Truth gets messy and it might make them feel bad, so they're just going to ignore that part, right? Rational people look at the criticisms and realize that there's something to them and reject the beliefs that are indefensible because of it. But these are not rational people, are they?
And basically the complexity theory is that, well, the world is far too complex, far too intricate and detailed, right? I mean, if you look at all the fields of study, look at all the different branches of things you can go into in college and all just the different crazy understandings in the world, and the fact that we still don't even understand things totally, and it's in their complete way, then there must be a creator, right? Because how could something this incredible emerge from absolutely nothing, right?
And that's all something that the religious just yank out of their asses. What they're really doing is assuming that if they can't currently understand something, then it cannot be understood. There must have been a creator because that's the only explanation that provides those feel-good chemicals in the brain. Never mind that any of it is remotely defensible. Never mind that they have no evidence for any of it whatsoever. This very simple-minded way of looking at things is what they've chosen to run with and not look back. But here's the reality. If we look at something and we don't understand how it works, the only rational answer we can possibly have is, we don't know. It isn't a magic man in the sky did it. Yet that's the only answer that the religious have, because that's the answer that they've had drummed into their heads since they were born. Their own ignorance scares them, so they just make it up. They come up with an explanation that is entirely unjustifiable because it provides emotional comfort. Now, on some level, I guess there's nothing wrong with that, at least for the simple-minded, so long as you're willing to let it go when actual answers come along. But the religious have demonstrated a decided determination to stick with their beliefs even when their beliefs are demonstrably wrong. The Bible says the world was created in 4004 BC. Well, James Ussher figured that part out, but you know what I mean. Then we find tons and tons and tons of evidence that proves otherwise. We figure out how the planet, how the universe came into being, but nope. The religious have their fingers in their ears and they're screaming, "We're right, you're wrong, so there!" It's like arguing with children.
And the atheist response to that is that because the world is complex, that there must be a thing that is more complex that created it.
Where the hell did you get that? We're not saying that anything created it. That's you. Complexity doesn't imply intelligence or a creator. That's your claim, which you cannot back up. Evidence does not support that kind of interpretation. That's emotions talking, not intellect. Stop trying to push your delusions on us. We're not like you. We have nothing to do with you. We don't want to be like you. Thank goodness that we're not.
And if God is so complex that he created the world, then something must have created God. And it's this infinite loop, basically, what they get into.
Well, that's the logical conclusion based on your claims. If complexity requires more complexity to exist, then you can't just arbitrarily declare that your magical man in the sky is the exception to the rule, while everything else must be beholden to it. Again, we get right back to rationalization and not reason. They start with a conclusion that they really like for emotional reasons. Then they cherry pick data that supports it while absolutely ignoring everything that doesn't. Then they declare it all must be true. And the second anyone points out what they're doing, their fingers go right in their ears and they start screaming, "La la 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 la, we can't hear you."
There's actually a Harvard scientist who I think brought that particular point up. And that basically they want to rest their understanding in what we know now and ignore the fact that everything is so incredibly complex and crazy.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure who that might be, and certainly our apologist here doesn't provide any citations. It kind of sounds a little bit like Stephen Jay Gould, but, I just can't place it. If anybody has any ideas, let me know in the comments.
And don't even get me started on the psychedelic aspect of that. Is still a huge branch of science that is yet to be unknown. You've only dipped a toe into that area so far.
Yeah, it doesn't exactly surprise me that drugs would come up eventually. From the guy who can't see the giant plant right in front of his face. But here's the reality, although I know a lot of people simply don't like it, but drugs cause the brain to malfunction. You are breaking your brain by injecting, ingesting, snorting, or smoking whatever your drug of choice is. You'd have to be a real idiot to think that your malfunctioning brain is somehow going to teach you anything about the real world while it's completely wigging out. So please, let's not go down that rabbit hole. It isn't going to get you anywhere useful.
But the issue that I have with that argument is that you don't really need to have something that created God. He kind of solves that if you really think about it.
No, it doesn't. That's just special pleading. It's a logical fallacy for a reason. You cannot propose a universal law and then make exceptions to that law because you have no other options. Absolutely everything has to follow this rule. Except for my made-up exception that I'm going to declare out of the blue because it makes me feel good to think that it exists. Well, why does your made-up exception get to be the exception? I mean, you haven't even proven that your made-up exception exists in the first place. Keep that in mind. Why can't the exception be the universe itself? The universe that we all share and can actually prove exists. Well, of course, it can't be because that's not the solution that the religious are desperate to reach. This isn't about truth, it's about comfort, it's about feelings. The religious simply cannot be honest about it. If they were rational, they wouldn't be trying to shoehorn their religious beliefs into the situation. They would admit, as the rest of us do, that we simply do not know right now, and they would keep looking. They might look at the data, all of the data, not just the cherry-picked crap that fits their scenario, and perhaps suggest some hypotheses that might fit in with what we know right now. But that's not what they do, is it? This is why their beliefs simply make no sense at all.
Or the universal consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, right? The higher world, the higher dimensions, the spirit world, whatever you want to call it, like that kind of solves that riddle there, because it is a complex system that we cannot understand, right?
It's a made-up thing that cannot be demonstrated to exist in reality. That's why it's rejected as a real-world solution. You can't just make something up because it fits your pre-existing blind faith and expect anyone to take it seriously, yet that's exactly what the religious do. And for some reason, they cannot figure out why absolutely nobody outside of their little religious bubble buys into it. It's for the same reason that I can't just make something up, say, Bobo the Tree God or invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies, and declare that I've solved the problem. Except I haven't solved anything, and neither have you.
And so this system around us is complex enough, so we're trying to make sense of this, but yes, there's something greater that we cannot understand. We cannot see how, we cannot fathom how that has created this world.
Because that happens to fit into your pre-existing religious worldview. It's because you've got an agenda, and you're going to get where you want to get no matter what it takes. Ultimately, that's what all of this is about. The religious refuse to scrub their preconceived notions from the equation and just go on the evidence. The evidence, the full and unrestricted evidence, it doesn't get them where they want to be. So they start with the conclusion and they work backwards. And then they deny that's what they're doing. Anybody see a problem with this?
I don't subscribe to there needs to be a hierarchy of things. I think there can be one great power, if you will. But if you guys have any ways to compel me into that, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being illogical, although that's like a whole branch of study as well. Anyway, getting off track here. So
nobody, absolutely nobody, has to compel you to do anything. We just have to point out that you are, in fact, being illogical, irrational, and ridiculous. It's why religious arguments often look like a book on logical fallacies exploded all over it. The whole point of logic and reason and critical thinking is to edit out all of those subjective wishes and desires and go only with the facts at hand. That goes for everyone. It goes for me, and it goes for you. It goes for everyone on the planet. Nobody's subjective desires mean a damn thing, yet that's what religion is based on. 100% pure wishful thinking. The more you look at these religious videos, the more clear it becomes that they aren't only not paying attention to the real world, they're actively hiding from it. Reason and religion share absolutely nothing in common, except they both start with the same letter. Now, I suppose I can't be too mad at people because often this isn't their fault. As we spoke about in the first part, religion relies on indoctrination, and most of the time, the religious have simply been brainwashed into this ridiculous cult before they had the tools to think about any of it critically. Often, because of their religious indoctrination and beliefs, they never develop those skills at all, and certainly they are incapable of applying them to their religious beliefs, because the first thing you learn as a newly minted theist is not to ask questions and never doubt. If you can't doubt, then you can't look critically at your beliefs and ask yourself why it doesn't have any evidence. Then it's really hard to get yourself out of the mindset that you've already got it all right if you only just blindly believe. It's why he's asking badly phrased and meandering questions about atheism instead of taking a look inward and wondering why the hell he believes the unsupported nonsense that he believes. It's a much better use of your time, but The religious are simply incapable. And that's kind of sad, isn't it? Anyhow, next time we'll get to his last question and all of his meandering sub-questions that he's invariably going to have. Go ahead and post any predictions in the comments, and we'll see just how easy it is to read our theist here. I've already got some ideas on my own, so let's see if we're right.
Bum